Thank you so much, Rick. Hi, everybody. I'm Mindy with SnapNHD, Natural Hazard Disclosures. I am so happy that you joined me today because it's really important to understand how you can be successful when you open escrow and close. I don't want to give you bad news, but did you guys hear in the last 30 days that Southern California is number one across the entire country in not closing escrows? About a third of the escrows that open are not closing. Why is that? I think it's because right now, if you don't know if you're in a fire zone or a flood zone when you go into escrow, it could be an issue when you go to get your insurance. Insurance is extremely difficult. It's very expensive. And in certain areas, you can't even get it. You have to go with the California Fair Plan. So, because the national hazard disclosure industry is still not regulated, but mandatory, all the reports are not written the same. And what separates SnapNHD from my competition is that we've been in partnership with CAR on the zip forms. We're the second drop-down box on the RPA, your residential purchase agreement, and we are endorsed and approved by them. When CAR approves us, it's a big deal because not everybody is allowed to even be on the drop-down box on the RPA. So we've been there for over 9 years. We have $10 million VNO that protects all of you in the transaction. Buyer, seller, listing agent, buyer's agent, transaction coordinator if you use one, and escrow. So we protect all of you, which is huge because Civil Code 1103.7 requires everybody in the transaction to have this report. The buyer must receive it within 7 days of the accepted offer. So why is everybody waiting still for escrow to order this report? If you have a listing presentation, you can take this report for free. When you open escrow, you already have your SnapNHD report when you have your listing agreement signed, and then you can go through it with the seller and find out, are you in that fire zone? If you are, is it on the state level or the local level? If it's the state level, it will be CAL FIRE doing the defensible space inspection to be compliant with AB 38. If the fire zone is on a local level, it will always be the local fire department that will do the defensible space inspection. And SNAP NHD has in our report, under AB 38 and additional disclosures, a link that takes you directly to ask for the defensible space inspection. So when you get our report early and you're prepared, you can get all of these things lined up while you're going into escrow, rather than waiting once escrow is open and start this process. Because who wants to find out halfway through the escrow process that you're in a fire zone, can't afford the insurance, and now you fall out? So this is where the Fortress Fire report comes in. Did everybody see on the RPA 4+ years ago that Fortress Fire Wildfire Disclosure Report was added to the RPA? It is not mandatory, but it is fantastic. It gives the client, the buyer, like a roadmap to compliance. And so while you're waiting to get the defensible space inspection, and although it is not a point of sale here in Southern California yet, buyers are nervous and scared to move forward in fire zones for good reason, right? Everybody just saw a year ago, the Palisades and Altadena burn to the ground. And it's really scary if you're in that environment. So, how do you diffuse it? How do you make the buyer feel more safe? Get the Fortress Fire Wildfire Report when you're in a fire zone so that you can help move this process forward. So, I want to share with you that we have on our Snap NHD website what's called Hazard Preview. And the hazard preview allows you to put in a property address, hit start, and it'll pop up the 6 natural hazards on the statutory form from CAR: flood, fire, earthquake, liquefaction, landslide. And it's free. So if you have buyers who don't want to live in landslides, fire zones, You can look up the property address before you even go to the open house. Don't waste anybody's time looking at homes, putting deposits down, opening escrow, and then fall out. So I'm going to play a quick 40-second video so you can see just how easy it is to property addresses on the SnapNHD website. Here we go. If anybody would like me to email them this video, I'll be very happy to. My contact information, Mindy at snapnhd.com or 310-387-4946. I send this video to agents and they give it to their buyers and they let their buyers look up all the properties that they're interested in looking at. And then they eliminate all the ones that are in the zones that they don't want to see. So isn't that a great feature for free that you can use? I love it. So now I would like to introduce my favorite lady, Michelle. She is from FortressFire, Wildfire Report, and she's going to share with us all of the reasons why having this report is really beneficial to show the buyer what the specific details on that exact property address so that they feel more comfortable buying the house and moving forward. So thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us. I'm so glad that you could be with us and give us your expertise on this report that's really making a difference for people to buy homes in California.
No, well, thanks, Mindy, and thanks to y'all for having me here today. I'm going to share my screen and walk through some of the elements of the Wildfire Disclosure Report and broader wildfire risk management program. As Mindy said, we've been around for a few years now. We were added to the RPA itself in late 2023, but we started prior to kind of rolling out within the real estate market with a very important mission in the wake of some of the large fires of the 2017, 2018, 2019, with the purpose of protecting homes and commercial properties from wildfire, and specifically recognizing the connection between protection and insurability, and really looking at protection across the board, the property and the financial investment, which is the largest that most people will make in a lifetime. So we are focused on availability and affordability of insurance, and we're also look to bring science based objective insights to unite the interests of all the people who are part of a real estate transaction: property owners, communities and HOAs, realtors, insurers, lenders, other service providers like my friend Mindy at SnapNHD, and really bringing together the interests of all with transparency and trust. So I don't have to tell you all that wildfire continues to be an important topic across California and the western states. We recognized a need in the market for not dealing with things just at that large category or classification zone area, but being very specific to the parcel and the attributes of the specific structures and vegetation that are that make up a parcel. And that's what makes our solution unique and highly complementary to some of the other tools used by CAL FIRE, the insurance industry, and others to the public utilities, USDA, to classify wildfire risk. Specifically, we have generated now more than 30,000 wildfire disclosure reports through our partnership with the California Association of Realtors, actually 100,000 of them. If you look at all the rooftops we've analyzed across the state of California. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those programs and insights around insurability from some of those programs in just a moment. So I recognize that this may be new information for some, it may be a refresher for others, but the Wildfire Disclosure Report is meant to support a smoother and maybe less drama-ridden path through the escrow process. We create a report specific to each parcel from commercially available satellite images. We have relationships with 5 different satellite providers, and we use those images, and we have an algorithm that looks at combination of the most recent and also the best resolution of those images and then use machine learning to basically create a digital twin of that property. As you can see sort of in the upper right-hand corner, we identify all of the structures, all of the vegetation, the zone 0, zone 1, 100 feet out, even potentially impact from vegetation on adjacent but not, adjacent or off parcel, which we know can come with its own challenges. But once we've created that digital twin, we use physics-based models to essentially set it on fire. So we're able to simulate a burn and looking at not just a variety of ignition vectors, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also wind directions, all 8 directions plus the no wind situation, and then also looking at it with a more like a standard 30 mile per hour wind, as well as the 80 mile per hour Santa Ana class winds. So this has been tested, and I'll talk about our back tests in a moment as well. To validate that we do greater than 96% accuracy, identifying properties that would ignite in a wildfire situation and those that would be resilient and remain standing. And that's the thing about wildfire, that it's unique from all other hazards. When the winds come through, it might take your roof off, but the winds go away. If the water or flooding comes in, you may get a foot of water in your first basement and first level, but then it subsides. But what's unique about fire is that it will continue to burn until all fuel, vegetation, or structures are consumed, unless the hero from CAL FIRE or the local fire agency shows up, which doesn't happen typically in the first day or so of a fire. We have analyzed more than 37 fires, and in those first 2 days, CAL FIRE and your local fire agencies are focused on the priority of safety of life and evacuation of people in harm's way and stopping the spread or protecting the perimeter of that fire. Only when those 2 missions are accomplished do they turn their attention to specific properties and structures. So there's a lot of benefit to a property owner, and frankly also to the first responders, of having a property that is resilient and protected, as well as insurable. So as Mindy mentioned, ordering the FortressFire Wildfire Disclosure Report is available right on the RPA, and it can be charged into escrow. It can be ordered by both the buyer or the seller. Increasingly, we're seeing a bit more momentum on the seller side, particularly in markets where there's more inventory on the market, and there may be an advantage to previewing the property that you're about to list in terms of its wildfire risk profile, but it tends to be mostly driven by buyers who want to understand, and we can all understand this, what type of vulnerability are they stepping into, what types of mitigations might they have to be responsible for when it comes to that certifying AB 38 inspection that Mindy talked about a little bit earlier. And then thirdly, the insurability, and being able to demonstrate to to your insurance broker that the property, while it may sit within that broader high or very high wildfire hazard classification zone, the property itself may be or may be able to be mitigated to a low vulnerability state. So I mentioned the different points of physics analysis that are being performed automatically once the property has been reconstructed in sort of in 3D dimensions. We look at convective heat, which is actual flame touch. We look at radiant heat, which you can think of as roasting a marshmallow, or when you go to your favorite cafe and it's kind of chilly and they have those propane tanks to keep you warm. If there is enough heat generated, you don't even need flame contact to create a failure of the material in a structure adjacent to those sources of those thermal sources of heat. Ember entry, which happens and in fact is responsible for greater than 60% of wildfire destroyed homes, which is when an ember, and it may not even be from that property. Embers have been known to travel miles, depending on wind conditions. And if you don't have fireproof vents, or you don't have screening that's sufficiently granular, those embers can enter a structure and create a burn from the inside out. Ember accumulation is when when embers lay on flat surfaces and eventually accumulate and create a secondary burn through. And then finally, structure to structure. So it's not enough just to clear the defensible space zones of offending vegetation. A home or a shed or an ADU can generate 20 times the heat pulse of a similarly sized tree. So when you have a tree that may burn for 1 to 2 minutes, you have structures, if they are in close proximity, that can burn up to 20 minutes, continually bombarding the structure or the roof, structure siding or roof, with a heat that can eventually overcome the structural material and create an ignition. So those are all the elements that we highlight in the wildfire disclosure report. And we end up creating a PIM score, a property ignition model score, between 1 and 500. Think of it as the FICO score is to the creditworthiness of the borrower, your PIM score is to the vulnerability of that specific property and all of its structural, vegetative, and topological attributes. But unlike your FICO score that you want to be high, you want your PIM score to be low, ideally 0 post-mitigation. So we also provide on-site inspections, and while these are not certifying inspections like CAL FIRE and your local fire agency, we have found some clients that want a very quick turnaround, depending on the timeframes involved in scheduling a certifying inspection. They want to know that they're going to pass the test when it arrives. It's kind of like taking your SAT prep course before you sit to take the actual exam. This is something that we offer to our California Association of Realtor members, and we will deduct the $140 cost of the Wildfire Disclosure Report against that $495 cost of an on-site inspection. So again, we have found sometimes this is done for a property that may not even be on the market, but the seller may be thinking about it, to understand whether having some detailed data-based information about the wildfire profile of that property may be helpful, and maybe even may spur them to make some mitigations before even listing the property.
Michelle.
Yes.
I would like to interject that I have heard from several of my agents who had buyers that were not willing to accept responsibility to do the AB 38 inspection and have it done within a year of escrow closing. They were so scared because of the Pacific Palisades fires that when they were buying their new house, they said, you know what? we don't want to be responsible. How much is it going to cost me? And then the buyer's agent wanted to ask $10,000 of compensation. And the listing agent called me and said, why am I going to give up 10 grand? This is ridiculous. I'm like, well, we need to show them what needs to be done on the property. Let's order the wildfire report. So we ordered the report, 140 bucks. And I'll be honest, they were sort of bitching about 140 bucks extra, even though, you
In the
know,
great scheme of
what's,
things, yeah.
I said, well, what's the price of the house? Is it more than $100,000? What's 140 bucks? And they laughed. $100,000? No, the house is like 1.5. And I said, so you're willing to walk away after being in escrow for 30 days because your buyer's scared? Why don't you and the other agent buy the wildfire report for 140 bucks? No one lays out any money up front. Pay for it at the close of escrow. And they got it. And that's when the buyer said, okay, I feel a little bit better, but I really want the inspection. Well, they couldn't get the inspection for like 3 weeks, and they were
Yep.
supposed to close in a week. So I said, get your $495 inspection from FortressFire, because then you'll see what needs to be done on the property, even though it's not the certificate for AB 38. So you're less fearful. And the
It's,
agent
yeah.
says, $495? Who's going to pay for that?
But
And
that's
I
such a
said,
small price for the knowledge. The fear,
right.
removing that fear from your psyche is worth that, knowing,
Well, so that's what I said is don't you think that after this whole month of being in escrow, you spent how long finding the house? You finally are ready to close and you're balking over $495. Why don't you split it with the other agent? And then when everybody closes and you hug, you have a good positive experience at the end. Everybody's happy, buyer, seller, and then maybe you actually get another listing. She's like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So I guess they went through that process, called me back and said, oh my God, it was fabulous. The buyer's so much happier. They're relieved, right? Like you said, it took all that pressure off
it's
of their
confidence, the
chest.
confidence to move forward.
Yeah. So I said, why are you freaking out over $500 versus 1.5? Like, doesn't that make up the difference? And she said to me, yeah, in the future, would you just talk to my client for me, Mindy? You did such a good job, like negotiating with me. And this is where I get upset that agents need to think for themselves how they can help move things forward instead of getting stuck in the mud and not closing and then walking away with nothing versus laying out 495 bucks and you're done.
And
And
let me tell you,
positive.
you get a lot for that $495. You get a refined version of the aerial risk report that we call a ground risk report. Because think about it, if it's a satellite image, you can't see how far up a very large tree may be limbed. It may be limbed up sufficiently that there's enough distance between the canopy and the roof that you don't have to remove the tree. Talk about saving money. I don't know if you all have priced arborists, but
Oh,
removing
yeah.
trees is not for the faint of heart, maybe, unless you have maybe your own chainsaw. But that it's we think of it as being able to provide information that in some cases not quite as rigid as the the IBHS, which would say, clear cut things within certain zones 0, 1, and 2, where maybe just limiting it and retaining some of the natural charm of the property is possible. We can show you scientifically from a physics standpoint whether that needs to be, a concern. And then the ground inspection report details all of the potential violations against both AB 38 and an IBHS inspection. And you can see it right on that report. So you can know that you're going to pass the test when you do get that certifying appointment. And then finally, the service orders quote. Now, we do not provide mitigation services. So this is not something that we're doing to generate incremental revenue for ourselves, but we will present all of the work to be done line item by line item, grouped into structure hardening and vegetation and fuel management, and approximate ranges of costs. Now, you may know a guy who can do it for less, but we're going to at least give you data on transactions in your half of the state. And Mindy, to your point, this would create a budgetary estimate of what remediation work would look like and be able to then be discussed amongst buyers and sellers if there was an active transaction in play.
Which makes a huge difference because this is where people get hung up on how much compensation do I ask for? Am I getting screwed over by what's going to need to be done later within the year? And who wants to fall out of escrow for that when you can prevent it? That's the whole point, right? You can prevent it for so little money and keep moving forward. So, yeah, this is really
Absolutely.
good. Look at
Yeah,
this.
and
I haven't
this is
seen
our
this.
this is our little cheat sheet on based on your role, are you an owner or seller versus buyer, where the wildfire disclosure report and where an on-site inspection can be helpful in the process of pre-listing, after listing, before you make an offer, after even after closing, because we've actually seen, Mindy, Snap clients who ordered a wildfire disclosure report maybe 6 months ago or more. They're now in the house, they're preparing for that certifying inspection, or maybe they're preparing to try to find insurance alternatives other than the FAIR plan, which was their only option at the time of close. And so they're looking for information that will allow them to first of all pass the certifying inspection, but to be able to prepare a package for their broker. And we have seen examples of this happen where they took the report and the inspection and then photos of the mitigations that they did, either DIY or through, local contractors, and then they
Right.
presented that. And now I'll tell the truth, shoot the messenger here. You're not going to see a lower insurance price, but you may see it lower than the increase you would have gotten, and
Right.
potentially with better coverage terms than the
Right.
FAIR plan, which is, notoriously,
Lousy.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, yeah, and it's just more transparent, right? You see what you're walking into. And to me, that's huge because the fear comes from the unknown,
Yeah,
not knowing.
it's demystifying it, and it's
Right.
aligning everyone around objective data, not fear or assumptions or worst case, scenario catastrophizing.
Right? Yeah, the specific data keeps you at least grounded.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to share a little bit about what we've learned from some of our other programs. So FortressFire, we really value our residential realtor relationships through the California Association of Realtors and our NHD channel partners. But we also have other insurance programs: wineries, commercial, industrial structures, retail, educational institutions, fine art, and collections. And what we have found is that insurers, now it's more in the E&S market right now than admitted carriers, but they're recognizing that a more nuanced look at underwriting and renewals and pricing is possible with this sort of data. And not only making those initial decisions, but looking at ways to integrate everyone's interests and a desire to partner with property owners who are equally committed to mitigation and loss prevention by by performing necessary and recommended mitigations and looking, and looking at solutions that provide ongoing monitoring and protection so that losses can be prevented. And this really brings, as I said, everyone's interest together with transparency, trust, and alignment. Because let's face it, no one wants to experience a loss. And that's really what this, what we are trying to help catalyze across the real estate and insurance communities, is that it's not just about pricing for risk, because that's, that can't go up forever, but it's really about getting people focused on loss prevention, because it's in everyone's best interest. The best claim is the one that never had to be filed, because there was no loss. The property owner hasn't lost, priceless family, memories, the insurance company does not have to pay out. And you also don't have the worries about rebuilding, which are a challenge when most insurance policies are not yet replacement value.
Yeah, that's serious.
Yeah. So another program that we've rolled out within some of those other insurance channels is a remote monitoring and alerts, where we're using weather, satellite, and other information, including fire, active fire information through CAL FIRE, to create not just alerts in an elevated fire condition or an active fire perimeter, but also creating a monthly report that does a snapshot of the health of the vegetation. Our data uses weather, vegetative stress. We look at 10 years worth of data for that area and the current weather patterns to create alert mechanisms, both for property owners and, if it's an insurance sponsored program, to help insurance companies better actively manage their portfolios. So this is just something that we're seeing primarily in commercial markets, but something that we are considering, a variation of that could be interesting for the residential marketplace. Yeah, so these are all the different types of communications that we're able to provide. And with our insurance sponsored programs, they're aligning this subscription with the policy coverage period. Again, aligning interests of property owners and insurers. So that's what I came here to share. I appreciate, Mindy, the dialogue with you. I'm happy to take any questions from anyone else who's on the call. I know this is a lot of information, but hopefully as it becomes a little more mainstream, not that we want wildfires to become mainstream, but the solutions available become more mainstream, there's an understanding of how this can help real estate transactions proceed more smoothly with fewer surprises, which is in everyone's best interests.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was fabulous. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle or for me? No, we were so thorough. You're good. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody joining us. I guess you can stop sharing your screen. There we go. See your beautiful face. Thank you, Rick and the PV board, for having us, and for those of you who joined us. And we're always here to keep you safe, protected, and we are your NHD resource. So thanks for having us.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mindy. Thank you, Michelle. All right. And we will see you next time. All right. Have a great day.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye. You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.